Welcome to the malware lecture. Let's dive in. So what is malware? The term malware is a combination of the words malicious and software. Basically, it's any software intentionally designed to cause damage to the software and/or hardware of a computer or a computer network. Of course, when I'm saying computers, I'm referring to a wide range of devices, from microcontrollers, wearables, such as smartwatches, to mobile phones, tablets, consoles, personal PCs, servers, and so on. What can malware do? Depending on the purpose for which the malware was built, it can do one or more of the following things. Some malware can tamper or even destroy data. In some rare cases, malware can even damage or destroy hardware. It can make systems vulnerable by creating backdoors that can be then used by even more malware. In some cases, malware can install other malware. It can generate spam or create denial of service attacks. It can also deplete the resources of the system and use these resources for malicious purposes, such as denial of service attacks. Last on our list, malware can be used to spy on users, extracting confidential information about the users. In this lecture, we'll have a look at 8 of the most common types of malware: virus, worm, Trojan horse, malicious bot, ransomware, spyware, adware, and rootkit. So let's start with the most widely known malware, the virus. The easiest way to understand a computer virus is to make a parallel with a biological virus. Let's take COVID, for example. COVID, like any other virus, needs a host so that it can replicate itself. In order for someone to get infected, some kind of interaction with an infected person needs to happen. Like, for example, a handshake, staying in close proximity without a mask, or touching something that the infected person touched. Once the virus gets inside the person's system, it attaches itself to healthy human cells and uses these cells to create other instances of the virus, infecting even more cells. A computer virus is a malicious program or code which works in pretty much the same way. First, a computer virus requires a host program which it needs to infect. For example, a computer virus could infect the operating system, such as, for instance, Windows. Second, a computer virus requires user action to transmit itself from one system to another. Viruses cannot spread without some sort of action from a user, like, for example, opening an infected Word document. And third, similar to a biological virus, a computer virus infects other programs, inserting its malicious code. Now that we know what a virus is, let's have a look at some types of viruses. First, we have the polymorphic virus. A polymorphic virus changes its code each time it replicates itself. It does this to evade detection by antivirus programs. Because of this reason, modern viruses are usually polymorphic. Next, we have the boot sector virus. This type of virus is triggered whenever the victim starts their computer. After that, we have the file infector virus, which inserts malicious code into executable files such as, for example, media player, Word, Excel, or the operating system. Another type is the browser hijacker, which alters certain web browser functions. The altered functions could, for example, automatically direct the user to a malicious website. Next on the list, we have the resident virus. This type of virus inserts itself as part of the operating system and is loaded in the RAM memory whenever the operating system loads. Next, we'll discuss about direct action virus. This type of virus is triggered when the user executes a file containing the virus. Otherwise, the virus remains dormant. Yet another type is the macro virus. Macro viruses are written in the same macro language used for software applications such as Word, PowerPoint, or Excel. This type of viruses spread when the victim opens an infected document, which often spread via email attachments. Last on our list is the multipartite virus. This kind of virus infects and spreads in multiple ways. For example, such a virus can infect both document files as well as operating system files. Another famous type of malware is the computer worm. What exactly is a worm? A computer worm is a standalone malicious program that self-replicates in order to spread to other computers. A worm can replicate itself without any human interaction and is a standalone program. So, a worm does not need a host. let's have a quick look at some worm types grouped by means of spreading. First type is internet worms. Internet worms scan the network using infected computers in order to find other vulnerable computers. If such a computer is found, the worm will then attempt to connect and infect the vulnerable machine. Next, we have email worms, which spread through email messages which contain malicious attachments or links to malicious websites. Yet another type is instant messaging worms, which spread by sending malicious links via instant messaging applications. Last on our list is the file-sharing network worms, which place a copy of themselves in a shared folder and spread via peer-to-peer network. Let's also have a brief look at a concrete computer worm example, Stuxnet. Stuxnet is a computer worm first discovered in 2010. It targeted the programmable logic controllers, which are industrial control systems used for industrial processes such as the centrifuges used for separating nuclear material. Stuxnet exploited several zero-day vulnerabilities in Windows and infected over 200,000 computers. It is reported that Stuxnet caused over 1,000 machines to physically degrade, ruining almost 1/5 of Iran's nuclear centrifuges. Next, we'll discuss the Trojan horse malware. Similar to the Trojan horse of the ancient Greek story, a Trojan horse or a Trojan is a deceptive malware which misleads the user of its true intent. Trojans usually spread through social engineering, for example through malicious email attachments or from malicious websites. As opposed to viruses and worms, Trojans do not attempt to propagate themselves. Let's explore some Trojan types. First on our list, we have the backdoor Trojan, which gives malicious users remote control over the infected computer. Depending on the Trojan, this enables cybercriminals to do things like send, receive, and delete files, launch programs, or display data. Backdoor Trojans are often used to create botnets that can be used for cybercriminal purposes. Another type that's running on the victim's computer. Next on our list is the Trojan Banker, which, as you already probably guessed from the name, is designed to steal credit card information or the credentials for online banking systems. Yet another type is the Trojan Distributed Denial of Service, or Trojan DDoS, which is used to conduct denial of service attacks against targeted web applications. You will learn more about denial of service attacks in another lecture. Now, let's talk about the Trojan Downloader and the Trojan Dropper. These Trojans are used to install other malware in the infected machine, such as other Trojans or viruses. The Trojan Downloader basically downloads and installs other malware, while the Trojan Dropper contains other malware source code embedded inside of it. The Dropper uses embedded source code to install new malware on the infected computer. Next, we have the Trojan Fake Antivirus, which pretends to be legitimate antivirus software. They are usually designed to obtain money from their victim in return for detection and removal of threats, even though the threats that they report are actually non-existent. After that, let's have a look at the Trojan Ransom. This type of Trojan can modify data on the victim's computer so that the victim cannot use the data anymore. The cybercriminals will only restore the data after ransom money is paid. Last on our list is the Trojan Spy, which, as the name implies, spies on the victim. For example, it can do that by tracking the data entered via the keyboard, taking screenshots, or getting a list of the running applications. Let's move on to the next malware, the malicious bot. First, in order to define what a malicious bot is, we have to know what a bot is. A bot is a software application that runs automated and repetitive tasks. The most common use of bots is web crawling, in which bots gather information from the web. Another type of bots are chatbots, which are used more and more recently. These kind of bots are often used by organizations to automate part of the support offered to customers. Okay, now that we know what a bot is, we can have a look at the malicious bot. As the name implies, it's a bot used for malicious purposes. Malicious bots are usually self-propagating malware that infects computers. These bots then are used for cybercriminal activities. Multiple computers infected with malicious bots can form a bot network called botnet. Botnets can have different types of architectures. Some of the first botnets use the client-server architecture, in which the bots act as clients and connect to a server also known as Command and Control Center. The Command and Control Center then issues commands to the bots execute the commands and relay the results back to the Command and Control Center. We can see an example of a client-server architecture on the top right part of the slide. In the middle we have the server, the Command and Control Center, and around it we have the clients, the bot-infected computers. The main disadvantage of this type of botnet architecture is that if the Command and Control Center is compromised, the whole botnet can be potentially shut down, since the Control Center issues commands to the whole botnet. A more resilient architecture is peer-to-peer. These botnets do not have a centralized server, and each bot behaves both as client, which receives commands, and as server, which issues commands. How does this work? One way can be as follows. Each bot searches the network for other bots, adding them to a contact list when found. The owner of the botnet can issue commands from one of the bots, and then the bot spreads the command to its known contacts. Then each of the contacts spreads the command further on. In order to make sure that the commands are genuine, the owner of the botnet can use a secret key to digitally sign the commands. This way, the bots can verify that the command is indeed genuine. We can see an example of a peer-to-peer botnet in the bottom right part of the slide. Each computer in the diagram is infected with a bot. In the diagram, we can see that we don't have the central server anymore and that each bot has several connections to other bots in the botnet. Now, let's explore some malicious bot types. First, we have the spam bots, which, as the name implies, are designed to propagate spam emails or messages. Another type is distributed denial of service bots or DDoS bots, which are used to initiate distributed denial of service attacks against specific targets. You will learn more about this type of attack in the denial of service lecture. Next on our list is registration bots. These bots use specific email addresses to sign the victim up to numerous services in order to flood their email inbox. This can be used to distract from important messages such as a security breach. Now, let's talk about malicious website scrapers. Besides legitimate purposes, website scrapers can also be used maliciously. For example, malicious website scrapers can be used to obtain the content of websites in order to create malicious copies of said websites. Related to this, there are bots that scrap the internet for information about individuals. For example, such a bot could scrap information from social media such as LinkedIn and Facebook so that cybercriminals can use this information to prepare spear phishing attacks. Other types of bots can open backdoors on the infected computers so that even more malware can be installed. Last on our list, we have viewbots, which are used to generate fake views, comments, and likes on the internet. As a concrete example of a botnet and a Trojan, we will talk about Emotet. Emotet is a malware which was first detected in 2014. It started as a banking Trojan that was designed to steal banking credentials. Emotet evolved into a downloader Trojan used to install other malware. Then, Emotet was also configured as a botnet, delivering malware as a service to cybercriminals. The cybercriminals using Emotet could, for example, obtain banking credentials of victims using malware or install ransomware on infected computers. Emotet spread through spam emails. The emails contained infected attachments such as malicious Word documents that contained the malware. Recently, it even used the fear of COVID to spread itself via spam emails, pretending to educate victims about COVID. Emotet was one of the most active and dangerous threats up until recently. Emotet has suffered a major disruption in January 2021 after a major collaborative effort from international police. Police has captured several hundred servers around the world which were used to manage infected computers, spread the malware, serve cybercriminal groups, and improve Emotet. Next on the malware list is ransomware. Ransomware is a type of malware that threatens its victims with blocking access to their data or threatens them with publishing confidential data on the internet unless a ransom is paid to the attackers. The most common types of ransomware are encrypting ransomware, non-encrypting ransomware, and exfiltration. The encrypting ransomware basically encrypts the victim's data, making it unavailable to anyone. Then, the cybercriminals behind the ransomware ask for a ransom in order to provide the decryption key to the victim. Using the decryption key, in theory, the victim can decrypt the data and have access to it again. However, be aware that even if the victim pays, there is no guarantee that the cybercriminals will actually provide the decryption key. The second type is non-encrypting ransomware, also known as scareware. This is a less dangerous malware, which just pretends that it has encrypted the victim's data. For example, such scareware can display an image on the victim's computer saying that the files have been encrypted by ransomware. This would be done in order to scare the victim into paying the ransom. However, in case of scareware, the victim's data is still intact. Last type is exfiltration or leakware. This type of ransomware threatens to leak online personal data of the victim, such as, for instance, private pictures or private conversations, unless a ransom is paid. However, similar to encrypting ransomware, the victim has no guarantee that the attacker won't leak the data anyway. Let's have a quick look at a concrete example of ransomware. WannaCry is an encrypting ransomware which was first discovered in May 2017. WannaCry is an encrypting ransomware which was first discovered in May 2017. It spread through the internet using an exploit named Eternal Blue, which targeted Windows operating systems. The Eternal Blue exploit was allegedly leaked from the US National Security Agency. Even though Microsoft released a patch in March 2017 that fixed the vulnerability exploited by WannaCry, in May 2017, WannaCry still spread to over 230,000 unpatched computers around the world. You can see on the left side a picture with the countries affected by the initial WannaCry attack. The affected countries are colored in red. WannaCry impacted many companies and organizations, such as the Spanish telecom Telefónica and the British National Health Service, impacting multiple hospitals which had to turn away patients and cancel scheduled operations. WannaCry also impacted FedEx, Deutsche Bahn, Honda, Renault, the Russian Interior Ministry and the Russian telecom Megafon. The original attack of WannaCry was stopped a few days later after a kill switch was found which prevented WannaCry from spreading further. Next, we'll talk about spyware. Spyware is malware that infects devices in order to gather information about its victims. For instance, depending on the spyware, it can gather information such as credentials to different websites, browser history, list of applications installed, emails sent and received, the input introduced from the keyboard, or credit card information. Next on our list is adware. Adware stands for Advertising Supported Software and is basically software that is designed to generate ads. Adware can also encourage users to install additional software promoted by third-party users. Adware is not necessarily malware. It can be used in legitimate use cases in which developers obtain extra income from ads. These ads can be embedded in their websites or applications. There are also other types of adware which can be potentially unwanted applications. First, we have legal but abusive or deceptive adware. This type of adware might make it difficult for the user to opt out of installing additional software. Also, in this category we might have adware which displays ads that might redirect to malicious websites. In these cases, the creator of the adware might not be aware of the malicious third-party ads. Another type of abusive but legal adware is adware that produces excessive ads. An example of such adware can be a browser toolbar that bombards you with ads. Finally, we have illegal, malicious adware, in which the adware intentionally distributes malware or links to malicious websites. This type of adware is often accompanied by spyware. Last on our list is rootkit. The term rootkit is a combination of the word root, which is the name of privileged account in Unix-like operating systems, and the word kit, which refers to the collection of software that implements a tool. A rootkit is a set of software tools used to gain privileged access or control over a host. It is usually classified as malware since it's often used for malicious purposes. Malicious rootkits are designed to stay hidden and conceal themselves as well as other malware. There are, however, some legitimate utilities using rootkits. For example, some applications that emulate hardware or software, or some applications that are used to detect cheating in online games. With that, we conclude the exploration of different malware types. Before we wrap up, let's have a look at the malware matrix. You might have already noticed that some types of malware can overlap. To better understand the relations between different malware types learned today, we will explore the following malware matrix. A virus cannot be a worm. Why? Because a virus requires a host, while a worm, which is a standalone program, does not. A virus cannot be a Trojan either, because a virus can replicate itself while a Trojan cannot. Besides that, a virus can be a malicious bot, ransomware, spyware, adware, and finally, can use a rootkit to gain privileged access and/or conceal itself. Next, let's have a look at the computer worm. As we discussed, it cannot be a virus. Also, a worm cannot be a Trojan horse, because a worm can self-replicate while a Trojan cannot. Again, besides that, a worm can be any other type of malware, such as a bot, ransomware, spyware, adware, and similarly to the virus, it can use a rootkit to gain privileged access. After the worm, let's talk about Trojan. As we already mentioned, a Trojan cannot be a virus or a worm. But similarly to the worm and virus, it can be other types of malware such as bot, ransomware, spyware, adware, and rootkit. Next on the matrix, we have the malicious bot, which can also be any other type of malware. After that, we have ransomware, which similarly can be any other type of malware. One small note for ransomware. While technically possible, it does not make much sense for a ransomware to also be an adware. Next, we have spyware, which can also be any other type of malware discussed today. After that, we have a look at adware. Similarly, it can be any other type of malware discussed today, with the note that for adware, it does not make much sense to also be ransomware. Last, we have the rootkit, which can be used by any other type of malware discussed today in order to gain privileged access and/or conceal the malware. I hope that after discussing this matrix, you now have a better understanding of relationships between different types of malware discussed today. To recap, in this lecture we learned what malware is, what it can do, we explored the most common types of malware, looking at their capabilities and some concrete examples. Finally, we had a look at the malware matrix to better understand the relationship between different types of malware. With that, we conclude this lecture. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask us. See you soon in the next lecture.